Chapter 10, we're going to get into compounding interest. So compounding interest is going to be a little bit more advanced than the simple interest. And this is where our required calculator comes into play. So again, looking back at your class syllabus, you're required to have this Texas Instruments BA2 Plus. Either get it hard copy, actually a real one, or you can get an app for your phone. So again, if money's an issue, the app is free, but it does have ads that pop up. But just make sure you get this calculator because we are not going to follow the tables in the textbook. The tables to me are so old school. We're going to use the financial calculator to solve them, and then you're going to have a project that you actually use the Excel formulas to do it, because that's really what people are using in today's world. Is those functions. So we're not going to use what the textbook shows, we're going to use the calculator. The textbook does have an appendix that they show you how to use this calculator, but again, we're going to use it all throughout this chapter. So the time value of money keys, abbreviated the TVM, are these ones that I have circled here. So it's the N, the IY, the PV, the PMT, and the FV. So you want to understand those very thoroughly. So our N is our number of compounding periods. Our IY is our rate per compounding period. The PV is the present value. What do I have today? What am I borrowing today? The payment is what we'll get into in our next chapter. It is an annuity. It's a steady stream of deposits that you make into a savings account or an IRA, or it's a steady stream of payments you are paying into a loan. So you got a car loan, you're paying the exact same amount for 5 years. That's our PMT. The FV is the future value. What does this investment turn into? So you want to get real comfortable using this calculator. I have separate videos that bring the calculator up on my desktop, and it's like an emulator, and it allows me to work the calculator right there on my computer screen. So if you're struggling, please watch those. But you've got to input the number first, and when you see it on the display, you push the corresponding key. You don't have to push enter or anything, just type in the number and push the corresponding key. But then when you get to which one of these keys you want to compute, you've got to tell the calculator, because the calculator doesn't know. So how you tell the calculator is you push the CPT button, and then you push the corresponding key that you're trying to compute. So some calculator tips. Again, I always get in the habit of making my present value negative. Now you make it negative not by pushing the subtraction button. The subtraction is actually telling the calculator to do something. The plus or minus button is what makes the value negative. So I push in the number, then I push the plus or minus button, and then I push the PV. You don't have to do that all the time, but if you start seeing that you get an error, like an ERR on your screen, or if you're doing the homework and you're computing for the N and you keep getting it wrong, then you've got to make that present value negative. You just got to tell the calculator that the present value is going a different direction than the future value. So I put money into an account, that's money coming out of my account, like going into an IRA, that's negative. At the end, I get money back, that's positive. So you got to tell the calculator the cash flow is going different directions, and that's what that plus or minus button does. What I also do, because the time value money keys, they remember what's in there. So there's like a memory. As soon as you put it in, it stays in, which is nice, because sometimes you'll have problems that'll say, you're saving for 10 years. What if you make 5% a year? What if you make 7% a year? What if you make 9% a year? All you got to do in those scenarios is just change the IY. The only thing that's changing is the rate. So it's nice that it remembers it, but when you're moving from one problem to another and maybe you're not using that key or that value, you got to make sure you zero it out, because again, it's going to remember it. So what I do is I always just deal with all 5 keys. Every single problem I do, if I don't have a present value, I'm going to put a 0 in there. If I don't have a payment, I'm going to put a 0 in there. If I don't have a future value, I'm going to put a 0. That way I know everything's good. Another way that you can do it is you can clear the time value of money tables. That's in our second menu, and it's above the FV button. So that's also another way to make everything go 0. Then my final tip is you definitely do not want your calculator to round to 2 decimal places. So it'll default, I think, to that. So you want to hit your second menu button and then hit the decimal button and then type in 9 and push enter. If it goes out 4, you're probably okay, but I like to go out just all 9, which is the maximum you can go. That way you know you're never going to be off due to rounding. So then this is what, again, when I put in my N and my IY, I always put it in per compounding period. There's another way on the calculator to set that, but I don't teach it that way. So I'm going to teach it by you putting in the number of compounding periods into the N, your IY per compounding period into the IY, or your rate per compounding period into the IY. So then you got to read the problem to say, okay, well, how many compounding periods do I have? If it's annually, you obviously just have 1 a year. That's the easiest. Semi-annually is twice a year, so there's 2 per year. Quarterly, there's 4 quarters in a year. Think there's 4 quarters in a dollar. There's 4 quarters in a year. There's 12 months in a year. And if it's daily, it is 365. So our ordinary interest, our simple interest, we pretty much stuck to 360. When you get into the compounding, it is 365. And the more often it compounds, the more interest we end up making on our investments. So here's an example. And then again, this is what you're going to do ahead of time. If I had a problem that said I'm investing at 5% for 5 years, if it compounds annually, my N is 5, my IY is 5. If it compounds quarterly, I'm going to multiply those by 4. So for my N, so I've got 20 quarterly compounding periods. Now my IY, note that we divide by 4. So it's 5% a year. I'm going to break that into the 4 quarters. So that's 1.25 each quarter. If it was monthly, again, my N is going to be multiplied by 12, but my IY is divided by 12. If it's daily, my N is multiplied by 365, and my IY is divided by 365. So you're going to have to do this and enter those values properly into your N and your IY so they match in terms of compounding period. So really the key to this is getting comfortable with the calculator, because I'm going to turn off the help me solve this, show me an example, because I do not want you to use the tables. I want you to use your financial calculator, and then when you do our project, you're going to use Excel.